All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America, and we have a really interesting series of interviews or conversations I'm going to have right now with TJ Aulds. He is a local reporter and business owner. He has his own news outlet in the Galveston area of Texas, just outside of Houston. And we have a situation involving a city manager who is currently facing multiple felony charges and arrests. And that's literally happening as we speak. But we wanted to talk about the whole situation because the backstory is so convoluted and complex that how do we get to the point where a city manager is facing criminal charges? So, TJ, why don't you introduce yourself really quickly for the audience? Because I would like to establish your bona fides. You are a legitimate news reporter. You are not a quote unquote citizen journalist. And I wanted to have you on the show because this is a very serious situation. And I wanted to give my audience the full background and understanding of how we got from point A to now point B.
Sure, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I am the owner of I-45 Now. We're a digital news outlet, former editor of the local paper, the Galveston County Daily News, and have worked in the Houston TV market as well at the CBS affiliate and as well as an all news channel in that market for many years. Been fortunate as I've been able to work my entire career in journalism. I don't know if legitimate is what some of my viewers would say sometimes, but yeah, that's a matter of opinion. And a lot of my career has been spent in this area, and a lot spent in the Galveston County, Galveston Bay community. For folks that don't know where that is, that's just south of Houston. And Galveston is considered the beaches of Houston. And Lamarque, where we're talking about, is right smack dab in the middle on the way down. It's right next to Galveston. And it's one of those communities where you have, it seems like this kind of constant turmoil going on within city and school government at one point, where it's a smaller town. It's a bedroom community, doesn't have much industry to speak of, but it's one of those things. I use the line a lot of times. The great thing about living in a small town is you live in a small town. The bad thing about living in a small town is you live in a small town. It is one of those things, and you've probably seen this, obviously in your career, that people, everybody's in everybody's business in a small town.
Very true.
And so opinions will run strong. It's a community, and this cannot be ignored. It's a community that, when it was founded many years ago, it was actually created in the middle of the night because people in that community were worried that nearby Texas City was going to annex them, and they were going to be lumped in with a predominantly African American community within that, and they created Lamarque so they wouldn't happen. When you start with kind of the basis from there has always been this kind of racial indifference that goes in, and that is actually playing into some of what we're seeing today. We don't want to say it's totally racial, but that plays into some of the accusations that are going around from some residents, as it involves one of the councilmen who's kind of outlandish character by the name of Joseph Lowry. So as we talk about this is one of those things. As I like to say that you'll see cities that get into these kind of chaotic moments. And I always say, well, I've been around long enough to know that it's like spinning the wheel, and this is this city's time on the wheel. And then you'll spin again, and it'll be another city. And that, for the most part, is true. But Lamarque seems to have their number come up a whole lot more than expected. It's still a city that's trying to, even this many years later, trying to find itself in many ways.
So let's talk about JB real quick. So JB Pritchett, he is the city manager, or he recently resigned. And I don't want to go into the whole story here. We'll just tease it out a little bit because it's literally developing as we speak. He is wanted on these 5 charges, and he has not turned himself in yet. He's, I believe, going to be doing that in the very near future. Not that he's on the run or anything like that. There's not a massive manhunt for the guy. Why don't you quickly unpack what is going on with JB Pritchett?
Sure. And one of the things kind of important to point out, he'd only been the city manager for less than a month when all this came to light. It was a split vote to hire him. He had been the deputy city manager, but he even got to that position pretty quickly. I mean, he started in the city of Lamarque in 2020 as essentially a social media manager. It was called a public relations specialist, but in all reality, he was hired to run the social media pages for the city. So we don't want to give too much gravitas to the title. And then somehow was able to parlay that into the position that he got. And basically, it was very short. Had gotten hired in June as city manager. Some things came up that were about questionable about his resume. That started a criminal and an internal investigation, and then charges came from that. Misdemeanor charges. Should point out that accusations of falsifying his education records and falsifying his military record. And then along the way, an incident happened at his house. Now he's facing an arson and a tampering with evidence charge. Those are felonies, and those came down right before the charges dropped. He resigned. Makes no mention of that, but even though the meeting that was being held that he resigned was going to be looking into those allegations
Gotcha.
against him.
You mentioned social media manager for him was his first stop in Marque, and that kind of has a nexus because a social media manager individual in Texas City was recently arrested, related to Lowry, right? So, there's a lot of individuals who are surrounding this Lowry character who are facing criminal charges or have been arrested, and he's really got an ability to get under people's skin, rile people up. I think we need to kind of unpack this Joseph Lowry character for the audience so they get a better sense of who this man is and how we got to the point where a city manager is, facing these criminal charges. Because JB Pritchett's facing, I think, 5 criminal charges, right?
Right.
5
3 misdemeanors and 2 felonies.
Okay. Yeah. So why don't you kind of walk us through a little bit how Lowry just sort of came to be? I've heard so many crazy stories about his quote unquote origin story and everything. And it's just all this mystery, all these allegations, all this innuendo. And I don't know what's true and what's not. But Lowry has his detractors. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, plenty of them. Many of them who spoke at Lamarck City Council here just as we're recording this last night. But so Lowry's Washington State. That's where he's from. He has a criminal record back there for distribution of methamphetamines. Served time, got it cleared from his record, moved to Texas, owns
Hold on, TJ. We can't just skip over this. So we got a city councilman in Lamarck who came from Washington, and he was convicted of distributing methamphetamines.
Methamphetamines, yes. But
can you unpack that? What do we know about that situation?
So he served his time for that, and then was able to get the entire record expunged because he had cleaned up his life. And
do we know how much time he served, or do we know anything about that background?
I'd have to go back. I think technically the sentence was for 10 years, but I don't think he served the 10 when it was all said and done because there was a rehab involved in there. But yeah, but he did serve time for it. And then once released, he had done his time, but then the process got started where not only does he have an expungement of the conviction and the arrest, under the law, it doesn't exist any longer because of that. The governor of the state of Washington signed it as part of an appeal that say, hey, I've turned my life around. I'm no longer that person. I don't want to have this hanging over my head, which is, by the way, allowed in every state in the nation.
But was this even an issue in the campaign when he ran for council? Were people even aware that he had
people knew about this? Yeah, it wasn't like people tried to say it was hidden, but it wasn't. It was known. It was reported by us. It was reported by the local paper, the Galveston County Daily News. So it was known. And he actually, by the way, doesn't hide it. He doesn't shy from it as well. He just says, yes, this happened. I did my time. And then, and I changed my life. And now people may doubt that, but it's one of those things that's just, the reality of the situation. So people were aware of it.
Okay. So Lowry leaves Washington and settles in Lamarque, Texas, and starts a new life.
Yeah. And gets down here. He got into the cement business, and he has a pumping company called Six Brothers that pumps, concrete in, from the trucks into where they put it in. Like, you'll see these big hoses that come over roofs of houses and stuff, and they'll lay foundations with that and stuff, or where they need to spread it evenly. That's his company. He moved into Lamarque, and was really, no one knew who he was really until an issue came up regarding the tax rate in Lamarque. And that's when he kind of emerges. And he was upset, thought the taxes were too high, and then found as he was looking into this at the time, the rate that Lamarque adopted, a new state law was in place that your tax rate couldn't be so much a percentage higher than the rate previous, found that it exceeded that rate, went to the local tax assessor collector. She looked over it with them, and then he started a petition drive to roll that rate back, which is allowed under state law. And he was successful and not only got it on the ballot, but then most of the voters said, yeah, we don't like our tax rate this high and we want to roll it back. And that's what put him on the scene. That's when people started paying attention to him. And then at the same time, though, this is when his online activities started coming up, and anyone who opposed him essentially was corrupt. That's his blanket term. If you oppose what he's doing.
I know a lot of people who work down in that area of the country. My connections are, my network is pretty deep, and I reached out to someone recently because Lowry came onto my radar because I saw a story about him recently getting into a conflict with a police auditor. And basically he was, hurling epithets and flipping the guy off, and it became a big to-do. And I was like, man, who is this guy? I kind of knew him before that because there's been stuff going on with Cesar Garcia, the former city manager for Lamarque, and some other stuff going on in that region. I also applied for some jobs not recently, but in the past down in that region. So it's just been on my radar. And I'm like, man, who is this guy? And then I talked to somebody, a buddy of mine that I know down there. And he goes, yeah, he's like the Alex Jones of Galveston County. And so he has this sort of like news network or news thing, Lowry News Network, which is why I kind of not half jokingly referred to you as a real journalist, not a citizen journalist,
Right.
Because he's going out there and smearing a lot of people with this so-called news reporting, correct?
Yeah, and he does it also. I should point out that long before he started up the Lowry News Network, which by the way he launched that because he said he would give $1 million to anybody who would start their own, because he didn't like the fact that us as well as the local paper were not reporting about what he said was scandals and corruption. And say, truth be told, we looked at all of it, and he didn't have any evidence of what he claimed. But then he got mad and he goes online, and then when he didn't even get anyone to bite on that, he decided to start up the Lowry News Network. But he goes on his attacks there. Then he goes on to attacks on his own personal social media pages. He's known for creating multiple personalities, like his best profiles, I should say, where basically it's him, but being voiced all over to make it sound like it's more. And he puts outlandish things out. Most of the time, it's unfounded stuff. And again, it is just him being, and the Alex Jones comparison is really good. It is throw everything you can up against the wall and see what sticks. And there's an audience for that. And he doesn't isolate it with Lamarque. He has done it with folks in League City. He's done it with folks in nearby Texas City as well. And that's just, that's kind of a, he's added to that since that rollback. He got the attention for that. He was seen as a
crusader, right? An anti-tax crusader.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, I should note, is after that, then he decided he was going to do not rollback, but recall elections against the mayor and another councilwoman. And yeah, he got the recall on the ballot, and then thoroughly just got destroyed.
This is all before he got elected to the council?
Yeah. So, and then the other one didn't even get enough signatures. It's one of those things just at the ballot box outside of his own win. He's 1 for 3 by the time he starts to run for office. And then he decides to run for office. I think it's important to note that the district he represents is one in Lamarque that is more white, more conservative than the rest of Lamarque is, and more folks who are the like-minded as far as tax hawks.
Okay.
Although when he does run, most people don't know who he is, except for what they see in the media. They don't know him personally. They hear about the rollback and the
Yeah,
like, and
he has the anti-tax crusader claim to
right.
fame. That's where he consolidated his little base niche of support, right?
And
Okay.
then he runs, and then the guy running against him, David Pennington, not a real strong candidate. He's run before and the like, but not a real strong candidate, not a real strong campaigner, but gets between 52-53% of the vote and is elected to council. And he ran his campaign the same way. He wouldn't conduct interviews. He just would, and with him, it was just like, the only way voters knew him was what he put online and the like. But he gets elected to council. And of course, now everyone's bracing because he has been an online provocateur. He's gone after the mayor. He's gone after another council person already. At that time, by the way, I should point out, he was going after the police chief. As
Yeah,
well.
there's so much here to unpack. So, okay, so to summarize it real quick, he has this tax crusade battle where he's successful in getting the taxes rolled back. So he scores a win there. He tries to broaden that scope of support by trying to recall the mayor, whose name's Keith Bell, right?
Yes,
And he also tried to recall a Kimberly Yancey, correct?
correct.
And these
Didn't
are
get
two
enough right. Didn't get
those are
enough
two black members of the
signatures.
council, right?
Correct, right.
Okay.
And Keith Bell's was on council a long time before he became mayor.
Okay.
And 20 plus years he was on council. Kim was the new and is the newer comer. She just got elected for the first time.
Okay.
And it's a situation in which he tried the recall. It didn't get enough signatures to recall Yancey. Got enough signatures to get Bell's on the ballot, but then when it came back, it was a total annihilation.
Was crushed.
Yeah, right. And there was no way that happened. That of course caused the bad blood because his whole campaign against Bell and Yancey is they are, and this is his term. They are the heads of a criminal enterprise, and that's his claim.
Now, how's that not defamatory? And I believe he's been sued by multiple individuals and business owners. I mean, this guy has pissed off a lot of people.
So far, it is because one, they're public officials, and to make that claim, it's more of an opinion than it is fact. Obviously, and
But
it's
even to say that
protected by the
they're
First Amendment.
a criminal enterprise,
Yeah,
I
the heads
mean,
of a criminal. It depends on what you consider to define criminal, and that's the tough thing is that, and because they are public officials, to give people a good comparison. If you follow the national scene, everyone who on the Trump side would call Biden the head of a criminal family. Of course, no one was ever held. It is tough, particularly in the state of Texas, to get a defamation lawsuit to get any type of ruling. You really have got to not only be found to do something that is not only false, but you knowingly know it's false. And it's got to be proven you knowingly know it's false. So that's the shield, if you want to say that. And proving someone's intent is the tough part out there.
I hear you. I guess wink, wink, nod, nod. I think we know Lowry's intent, right, on this whole thing because he's gone after the mayor and the council member with recall efforts, which have failed. He has been censured multiple times by his governing body. He got into it was it the Texas City mayor? And I think that's why the social media director or social media coordinator or whatever over in Texas City was recently arrested. I mean, I don't even know where to even go next. Let's stick with Lamarque real quick. Okay. So how many times has he been censured by the Lamarque City Council?
Well, it's come up numerous times. A lot of times it doesn't get voted on because the whole meeting falls apart. And it never gets voted on. And there's been times too that, the mayor has said, listen, we're not going to go down this path. People propose it. They go in executive session and Lord knows what's happening back there. And then they come out and I would say, I think it's 3 officially that the censure, there's been more than that as far as censure motions.
Right. But there's been at least 3 censures.
Yeah. The actual votes on it. And which for folks that don't know, that's basically a slap on the wrist.
Right.
It just says the rest of the council is saying, we don't like what you're doing. And that's it. Because in the state of Texas, you can't remove anyone from office and you can't even limit their powers at all. What powers they have, which is basically only voting and expressing their opinion as a council member.
Is he not being sued by also a business owner in Lamarque
He is
for slander or something?
Yeah. and that, it's going to wind its way through court. It's a contractor who is doing work for another person, a developer that Lowry, claims is corrupt and is, dealing under the table and paying the mayor and paying council to get permits and stuff. Again, no proof of any of that. But then at one point he accused this construction company owner that he was committing a crime and covering up for the developer that Lowry was attacking as well. That construction company owner decided, well, that's enough of that, and sued him. And we should point out too, Kimberly Yancey and sued him, and he sued her back, and they actually have a court agreement saying they won't talk bad about one another as well. I mean, that's in the 10th District Court, and neither one of them upheld to that. I mean, it didn't take long. They were both at each other again, saying nasty things about one another, and and it has become this kind of all-consuming turmoil in the city that beforehand it would take up like part of the meeting. Now it's consumed and it's gotten in the way of governance, and now that's where the seriousness comes in. It's that governance is
totally breaking down,
getting
right?
it, yeah, because while there's certain things still getting voted on, and it just like marathon meetings where it goes on and on and on. And I should point out too, Lowry is a target for a recall as well. And right now, the recall petitioners are just waiting for word of whether they got enough signatures on the ballot.
Okay.
They hope that they do, but that decision should come out here soon, and of whether or not he makes the ballot. Now, the flip side of that is you can have him on council or off council. He ain't going away. That's the one thing. He just won't have a vote on council.
I've mentioned it a couple times. There's a lot of other stuff about Lowry I want to get to, but before we do that, when we talk about the Texas City angle, because this is a wild aspect to it. In fact, it's still developing, because you just reported yesterday on this developing story. So why don't you unpack this a little bit? So in Texas City, you have a mayor who has been targeted. I forget the gentleman's name, who's been targeted by Lowry. He might target other elected officials as well. I'm not sure. And what I read a couple of months ago, or a month or so ago, whenever it happened, you had the social media employee with the city of Texas City who decided to create fake accounts impersonating Joseph Lowry, and then proceeded to make positive comments about Texas City employees and individuals. And that employee was subsequently arrested and is facing charges, correct?
Yeah, correct. And the back it up, Mayor Dedrick Johnson, he's the mayor of Texas City. Long before Lowry got involved in this, he was the target of some folks soon after his election. And mainly it was folks that, for lack of a better term, were slumlords. And they were paying an actual, I'd call it online investigator who's a former Emmy Award-winning reporter for the ABC affiliate here, and he was going out and doing these pieces that he was being paid for to go after the mayor because of those developers. Well, then Lowry kind of tagged in on that and saw, oh, well, I've done this over in Lamarque. Now I can go and help out neighboring Texas City people too. Along the way with that, then strife starts happening between the mayor and the police union in Texas City. So, and the police union at first was quiet about things, trying to get things worked out if they could behind the scenes. It was not being successful. And now that's turning an all-out public war between the police union and the mayor along the way.
And Lowry, with his criminal record, believe it or not, has positioned himself as being pro-police, correct? He's
right. And he's taken that stand the whole time. And this is not new for him. As I said, the Joseph Lowry of the days of meth dealing in Washington and the Joseph Lowry now are two different people as far as that attitude is concerned. Now, whether it's genuine or not, that's for someone else to decide. That's not for me to decide. But anyway, so Lowry saw as another opportunity to start stepping in and letting his voice in. So he started showing up at commission meetings. Texas City has a city commission.
Well,
It's a council.
He is the Lowry News Network, so I guess
Yeah,
he had to go.
and so he's going there and he's challenging the mayor on stuff he did, and he thinks he's in being an advocate for those in the city that are not happy with how the mayor's doing things, and has gotten involved with that. And one of the things he would do was constantly go on the city's Facebook page and ridicule the mayor, ridicule the city secretary, and anyone else he could think of within the city. And that had been going on for a while. And then someone created a Joseph Lowry page that looked similar to his, but it turns out it's a fake one. And then that person started posting comments that would be the exact opposite of what Joseph Lowry would say. And during that time, Lowry says he was blocked from the city's social media pages from his real comments.
Okay.
Now, that's under Texas law, you can do so because you can set policies, and if people violate those policies, you can block their access from commenting on there. It's not a free will game of doing that.
In Texas, a city can block a resident from commenting on their social media
and it used to be you couldn't, but what they did was they followed a court ruling in which if you violate certain standards on this, so and it wasn't about opinion. It was about like, hey, if you threaten violence, or if you come in there and post porn, or there are certain things you got to do, very specific things for that to happen,
to justify the banning. Okay,
right, but there is no confirmation he's been banned. It's just his claim.
Okay,
on there. But in the midst of all of this, he sees these comments that says it's Joseph Lowry, and it's commenting on how great the city is, and like which he would never do. And so when that was happening, he took a complaint to Lamarque PD about it, saying, "Hey, someone's created a page and they're doing all this." And
isn't this an obvious parody account though, or how does that play in this whole thing?
In the state of Texas, it's a little different. So you can be a parody account if you say you're a parody account, but if you're impersonating someone for the purpose of misdirecting, and so because he's a public official, it is looked at under the law as the comments being made there that are representing him are total falsehoods, and it's not a parody at that point. Based on the charge, it was aimed at confusing the voters.
But he's not even the elected official in Texas City.
Right.
Is that also another wrinkle, though? I mean,
and it could be he's not in there, but he's a political figure in the local community to neighboring cities, and so the reasoning there is that, hey, it does damage if people in Lamarque think he's talking well of Texas City, and whether or not it's that's going to be up for a court to decide.
But we have this wrinkle here, TJ, where you have you unpacked it, right? Where you have the police department or union is upset with the mayor,
right?
And Lowry's opposing the mayor and supporting the police department. Is it fair to say there might be some, I don't know, game playing a little bit here with the police? I mean, what are your thoughts on this whole charge against this employee?
Something that's important to note here too is that it's the Texas City Municipal Police Association that has the fight with the mayor. In Texas City, the Lamarque Police Department, this was a criminal investigation, and it doesn't seem to be any ties there. The detective that worked this case, he's a straight shooter.
Oh, you're saying Lamarque is investigating this?
Lamarque handled the
not Texas City.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Lamarque handled it. In fact, it was a surprise to Texas City when someone showed up with an arrest warrant.
Oh, okay. So that's an interesting wrinkle. I assumed that was Texas City that was investigating that charge.
No,
okay,
it was. Yeah, no,
that brings in an interesting element though, because the police chief in Lamarque and Lowry. So the police chief in Lamarque, Aragon, and the council member Lowry, they have an interesting history, but yet some people are suggesting that they are in cahoots now.
And it's tough to get around to that early on because the chief didn't bite on a lot of what Lowry said early on. Actually, in an open meeting, this really started a real rampage from Lowry. Was the chief called Joseph Lowry a terrorist in an open meeting?
Wow!
And
this is before he became a council member, or after?
As
Okay.
because of the harassment and the like. And the chief just straight out called him a terrorist.
Okay.
And obviously there had been no charges filed or anything like that. Lowry threatened to sue. It went nowhere. And so this gets into that kind of ugliness then too. And then it was every day, Aragon is corrupt and Aragon's part of the problem. He's covering up for the crooked mayor and all of this. And that became Lowry's calling to go after Aragon. Now, to hear Aragon explain this, and I have no reason to doubt this, and Lowry is kind of supportive, that at some point Aragon said, listen, I need to clear the air. I'm about building bridges. And if you watch Aragon in practice, this is what he does. He went, got a hold of Lowry, they sat down and talked. They didn't agree on everything. Aragon still told him, hey, everything, all these allegations you're making, if there was a crime, I'd investigate it. If you don't have a crime, we're not going to pursue it. And that became somewhat, I would call it a detente. Lowry, for his part, was like, okay, after meeting with the chief, I think he's a straight shooter and he's not covering up anything. Or would he cover up anything? And for the chief's part, as he told me, that, hey, I met with him, I understand where he's coming from on stuff, but I told him with no uncertain terms, I know he's frustrated about certain things, but that doesn't mean a crime has been committed. And there is some examples of where when folks sit down with Lowry, that he comes to a detente, if you want to say, with folks. And
Okay.
so now the suspicion is that obviously, now it's a situation where, hey, now that the Lowry got his claws into Aragon, the police chief, and then now things have changed. There is no evidence of that.
Okay.
There's claims of it, but there's no evidence of that. It is, even with the recent investigations and the like, there's no evidence that the chief has put his thumb on any investigation at all. Again, these are folks making allegations themselves that are just unfounded and have no proof.
I'm going to unpack that in part 2 of this interview, because right now you have the Lamarck PD investigating the city manager as a result of these these claims. I find that a little bit curious, so we'll kind of unpack that later. But the latest that you reported yesterday is that in that Texas City story with the social media director or manager who was arrested, Lamarck served additional warrants or something yesterday. Can you unpack that? What's going on?
Yeah, and there's a lot. So Derek Miller, who was arrested in a felony for the faking, accused of making that fake Joseph Lowry account, which, by the way, they tracked to how it was created using the servers in the city of Texas City. So I should point out. And now, based on what we know, is that as that investigation has gone on, there's found to have been communications with others within the city. And then, so search warrants were issued for other individuals' cell phones and to be searched.
Do we know who? Which individuals?
No, at this point. That part is sealed.
Are there any suspicions that there might be an elected official involved?
Yeah, but I would not an elected official, but a city staffer.
Okay.
At this point, because and so or staffers, I should say, and so, but there's no indication. There's evidence that it did happen. This is a search warrant that was issued, but it does take. You have to go to a judge, and you have to get the judge to say, "Yeah, I think there's probable cause to search," and so that's what that was about yesterday. And at this point, it's unclear where that's going, or if it does prove out to be anything. It could just be, in the context of things, innocent communication. It could be direction to do something or knowledge of a criminal act. At this point, it's hard to say.
So the Texas City angle is still unfolding. And then meanwhile, you also reported yesterday, I believe, that another individual in Lamarck, a local business owner, had turned himself in because he had faced charges for doxing Joseph Lowry.
Yeah.
And there's other individuals that have also faced charges related to Joseph Lowry. So why don't we kind of come back to the Lamarck angle again now and
Sure.
What's going on there?
So you have C.J. Beard, Carl Beard, owns a construction company, a ally of Councilwoman Kim Yancey. He himself very involved as far as how things work in Lamarck and politics and the like. So he has been one of those that's been a critic of Lowry and has challenged him every chance he gets and challenges authority that looked the other way, he believes. And so CJ, several months ago, actually, Lowry came and accused him of doxing him, which for those that don't know what doxing is, basically you publish someone's phone number and or personal address for the intent of either harassment or causing them harm, physical harm, or
Is this
putting them in
even
danger.
is that even when the information's publicly available? Or I mean, if you just post someone's information that's publicly available, is that doxing in and of itself?
That is the question for a court to decide. It's how it's available publicly. For example, yeah, I can look up Lowry's address, right? But if you publish it for the purposes of, and this is what the allegation is in the crime, if the publishing of that address for the purposes of causing harm or threatening someone, that's where it becomes doxing. So even, even if it is a known address or like, it is the next part of it that makes it doxing.
Do we mean physical harm?
Physical harm, and that could be damage to property,
right?
Could be harassment, could be physical harassment, anything along those lines.
So CJ Beard is an individual who is alleged to have doxed Joseph Lowry for the purpose of encouraging people to threaten him or harass him.
And that's
right?
That's allegations against him. It's a misdemeanor too, by the way. I should point out. It's a Class B misdemeanor, so it's a lower grade misdemeanor. Where this even gets a little more interesting is that the arrest warrant's been out for several months.
But it ain't like CJ's they got a bolo. There's not an APB out on a guy for a misdemeanor warrant. I mean,
So and a lot of times when you get that, they don't think it's a violent offense. Obviously, it's an online offense, and if he gets pulled over, I mean, somebody could run him and arrest him at that point. But he does have and CJ has, and he's done his time. Everything else has a past criminal record, nothing super major, and so that kind of influences some of the decision process, but no one's really, looking for him after.
And then we got a couple other individuals, right, who are facing charges. Can you walk us through that?
Mandolin Salazar, she is a civil rights and community activist. She is accused of taking images of Joseph Lowry's wife and creating an OnlyFans page, so a fake OnlyFans profile, and putting it out there and as if, she was willing to do on-camera sex acts and the like for money, and impersonated her on that. So she's facing a felony charge, and was charged as well. And that's being handled. And that investigation was being handled through the Galveston County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And then they got the charges done. And I should point out that at one point she was the top political surrogate for Kim Yancey. Now, the two of them have not talked for 2 years, so they had a falling out.
Okay.
But it should point out that's where she can come on the scene. She lives in League City, or I should say lived in League City. And, has been critical of Joseph Lowry, accused him of, of all sorts of things as well. But since that warrant was issued, she has not been found, and it's a state jail felony, and she's, somewhere out of state. No one knows where she is.
Now, is this a case of revenge porn where they took intimate photos, or is this like AI nudifying porn?
Right. At this point, it is technically it is under that same classification of revenge porn, even though it may not. When you go to an OnlyFans and it's soliciting, even if the images are somewhat maybe risque or innocent,
right?
If you're soliciting sexual acts, that falls under the same category
of revenge porn, even if it's not
right. Even though
the
nudity. Image itself is there, correct?
Okay.
So then that's the charge there, and that, again, that's a state jail felony charge. An interesting note, and should point out that Madeline was as recent as in last month was posting online, making allegations against Joseph, but doing so by sending messages to someone else who then would post it on her behalf. So there's some evidence there she's actively avoiding detection.
Got you.
And the interesting thing too, and this cannot be ignored, she's married to a federal law enforcement officer.
Oh, wow.
And so whether someone believes the charges are legit or not, it still comes to that there is a charge there. She has not turned herself in, and obviously don't know if she's actually with her husband somewhere or anything like that, but that's going to be looked into because, yeah, again, it is hard to say whether it's, whether these are legit charges or not. That's up for somebody else to say.
Right.
And all I know is there's a charge out there, there's accusations, and the process is to be handled in the courts. But it is what it is. Although it's questionable whether an extradition would happen if it's out of the county or out of the state where she's found.
Moving beyond these individuals who are facing charges related to Lowry getting under their skin or provoking them to do stuff because he's just, obviously throwing bombs and people are lashing out. I've seen so many things online about Lowry himself as far as beyond just the methamphetamine crime in Washington. People say that he has lied on his application materials to be a candidate. They say that he has defrauded the local economic development commission or council with some stuff. I've heard all kinds of allegations and innuendo about him engaging in nefarious activities. People say he's a racist. I don't know if it's true or not. What do you make of these cases? I guess for the sake of this conversation, I'd really like to drill down into the election allegations as far as whether or not he should even be a candidate or should have been on the ballot or if he should be removed. And the second one, definitely, I want to talk about are these EDC allegations. I don't know if it was a grant or a loan or some sort of dishonesty there. Grant. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So let's start with the election stuff. So there's two parts to this that are important to know. First up, you have your application you fill out for an election. Now, there is the state form. It's for a form you fill out for place on the ballot. That is only under state law the only recognized form.
Okay.
That counts. Now, many cities, many municipalities will then have another packet where there's city ordinances that talk about ethics and clean campaigns even. They ask for you to sign those as well. But for state law, it is purely, that one form, and that's the only thing that counts as far as state law is concerned. Now, there are two parts of this too, is that there are those who allege that Lowry lied about his criminal history.
Right. Meaning that you couldn't be a candidate for office if you have
a felony conviction.
Past conviction, yeah.
Right. But technically under the law, he has none.
Because you're saying it was expunged by the state of Washington before he ran for office in Texas.
Yeah. And there's also some question of whether or not a felony conviction in another state counts to that.
Okay.
Most courts have upheld that it doesn't come up a lot. Usually people who have a felony conviction don't run for office. But
you can state authoritatively that his conviction was expunged before he ran for office, and therefore he is not in violation of the state law, and all these allegations, innuendo, rumors are unfounded. Right.
Now comes the second part of that, though. You can make that claim. Let's give benefit of the doubt to those who make that claim. All right. It is not up to the city. In fact, the city is forbidden by law to make that decision. The city, while it has, these are our rules to run for office under the charter and everything else, the city can't enforce election laws. There is only one way to go. That's the district court.
Okay.
And so if those allegations are out there, the only way to settle that is to go to district court. And a district court judge has to make a ruling.
Has anybody attempted to do that?
Nope. No. And the officials and who has to do that is his opponent in an election could do it, or the city could do it. Or there is some, because if you're going to district court, you've got to be
have standing.
You have to have standing, right? And merely being a voter doesn't necessarily give you standing. It depends on the situation, right?
Interesting.
In this case, I think voters probably could do that if it was like a group of them to say, "Hey, listen, this guy lied on his form," and the like, and now the next phase is that the city form goes a step further than the state form, which says, have you ever been arrested in that type of thing?
Right.
And you check no. Now, here's where the question comes in. The entire case in Washington was expunged. All of it.
Right.
That includes the arrest.
But you're technically arrested, though. You can't undo an arrest, right?
You can't undo an arrest, right? But technically, under the law in Washington, it doesn't exist. Now, how Texas would recognize that may be different. Again, though, that's up for a district court judge to decide.
And nobody's taken that to the court.
No one's done that. And the council has had the authority. Now, I will say, more recently, there have been members of council have asked their city attorney to look into that so they could make a formal claim to a district court. But it's not gone anywhere yet, because every time that's tried to be discussed, something falls apart.
I just don't understand. It seems so weird because there seems to be so much division and a fracture. You think there would be, and JB was voted in as a city manager on a 3-2 vote. So it seems like Lowry's in the minority when it comes to that council. Why wouldn't there be enough support to go to the district court from that governing body?
Well, it comes into one thing is you really want to go down that process. While I think there is a thought, now it's a former councilman, but there is a thought by two of the councilmen I know, that council members, I should say, one's passed now and what's on, is like, hey, yeah, we don't have a chance in heck of winning this. Why are we going to go down this path?
Interesting.
And that's a calculated judgment. And it may be also, too, that the city attorney is because what the city attorney is telling the council is being done behind closed doors, because it's obviously. And so if that's the recommendation from your city attorney, says, if the city attorney says, I don't think this is worth pursuing, then pursuing it is not the the priority.
You do have to make the legal and the political calculation, right? If you go after somebody like Lowry in that district court battle, and he wins, then you embolden him even more, right? And give him more support and more publicity for his allies.
Even if he loses, it emboldens him. Joseph Lowry is not. This is, I think it's fair to say he has a narcissistic personality, and in that nothing phases him as far as that's concerned.
Okay.
You come at him, he's going to come back at you. And it's very, not to get political, but it's very Trumponian. It is that kind of same approach that Donald Trump follows.
Fair enough.
Which is, you come at me, I'm going to come back at you harder. So that is Lowry's approach to it as well. And as I have said, you recall or not, or this or not, removed from ballot, okay, it's not going to stop him. The only thing that stop him is, him deciding to stop, or a conviction on something that's really major.
Right.
But you can't even get charges.
Well, speaking of conviction on something, so let's talk about this supposed EDC fraud, right? What's going? I mean, there's a lot of people out there who don't like Joseph Lowry are criticizing him and saying that he is defrauding the taxpayers or the EDC, and he should be prosecuted. What's going on with that?
So these are COVID recovery grants, granted by, and this is a very important part of this, the Marque Economic Development Corporation, which set its own policies and rules.
Okay.
It is very important that this is not a state grant. This is not state money. This is local taxpayer dollars from sales tax, that the policies that were set forth by the EDC board itself. Now, why do I stress that? And the reason for that is that board also has the power to grant waivers and variances.
Okay.
Now, we're not saying that's happened because we're still waiting on a lot of evidence. Now, one of the rules is that one, it couldn't be a home-based business, and two, you had to generate sales tax dollars. Those were the two rules. Two of the rules that existed. The address that Lowry, and it had to be in the city limits of Lamarck. So Lowry used his home address, which is, by the way, his business address. It is where his business is registered as a business. So,
okay.
So now you go to say, well, is that a home-based business? or is it that's a business address? It just happens to be at his home as well.
Well, he lives
So
there, right?
yeah, he lives
So,
there. But
okay.
you're this is, and it gets so convoluted. This is why it's not as simple as anyone wants to make it out to be. And I'm not defending how he did this or not. The intention of home-based business was that the business you have wasn't like you ran an Etsy thing or out of your house, or you did tax services out of your house, something like that. This was that it had to be a legitimate kind of, and they wanted brick and mortar business.
Well, yeah, they want brick and mortar businesses that generate sales tax revenue to the city, right? I mean, if you have a home-based business, I mean, I don't think is concrete pumping generating sales tax? I don't.
And it normally doesn't, because it's a services, right?
Right.
And the material but the material, he doesn't sell it and doesn't have a sales tax receipt that can be found. So, but those are the two policies, and I say policies. They're not laws.
Right.
They're policies. EDC adopts them, grants, fill out for the grant, and they're granted. Okay. On the surface, this doesn't look right. There's no doubt about it. Doesn't look right. Councilman James Ross, former councilman now, brings this up, takes this to the district attorney. District attorney looks into it. Now comes the rub. When you have a crime like that, the victim, the DA wants the victim to participate in the prosecution. The victim in this case is either the EDC or the city of Lamarque.
Okay, let's unpack this for a quick second, because in Texas, the EDC is closely tied to the city, but is the city council serving on the EDC board? Or are they completely different members?
There will be usually a council member.
Okay.
I think Joe Compion, the mayor pro tem, is the council representative right now.
So the council appoints members to the EDC board. They'll have one or more members of the council actually on the board as well, but the EDC
usually
board is a separate. Okay, got you. Okay.
Correct.
So in this case, the EDC board has to be identified as the victim and decide they want to do something about Joseph Lowry, and or the city council itself can make that claim, correct?
Okay. So when the DA approached the EDC says, yeah, we don't want to pursue this. Most DAs in any crime, if the victim doesn't want to participate, the DA will say, yeah, when we can't get this cooperation, we can't do it. Now, the DA did tell Councilman Ross, says, well, why don't you have the EDC send a letter to Joseph Lowry and say, we want our money back.
Right.
There's no indication that's even happened at this point. Now, why is it important? As I was pointing out, it was policy or anything like that. Lowry may not be the only person that these rules were bent for. There is clear evidence that the rules were bent or ignored on two sections: sales tax revenue and can't use your home address.
You mean for Lowry, right?
Right. Yeah, for Lowry.
But you're saying that there might be issues with other individuals.
There were others that got grants, right? And some of those are allies of Lowry opponents.
You mean allies of individuals on the council who are opponents? So
correct. And I don't want to allege that anybody's done anything else wrong, but
understand.
It's become that there's a can of worms that gets opened that maybe the EDC doesn't want opened, because obviously they know the details, and they're being mum on this because, again, it was their policy. The law is only broken if the victim says, I've been victimized. The EDC is not. Now, the Lamarque Council has had this entire time the power to vote to say, we want a criminal referral to the district attorney's office. No one's put it on the agenda. It would pass. No one's done it.
You say it would pass, but if it can't even get on how we know it would pass if it can't even get on the agenda?
Because it would pass, because at that point you've crossed that Rubicon. You've crossed that Rubicon, and I talked to the mayor about this last week, saying, "Mayor, just put it on the agenda." Now there's a hesitancy, I think, because the moment you do that,
you have to apply the standard to everybody, right? As a standard,
right?
You have to.
Now all of a sudden there's a full-fledged investigation. And now it's not going to be just one person looked at. They will look over every single document. Now, and it comes into, did the EDC waive at some point, saying, you know what, yes, this doesn't fit our criteria, but we're going to grant a variance or a waiver here because we think this business does fit the criteria in spirit. That's their decision. There's no hard and fast law that says they had to go with what it's no different. The law says you got to do a certain thing when you build a building, right? But the Planning and Zoning Commission can grant a variance. The same thing applies here. But now again, there's no evidence that happened, but no one's also brought up the detailed documents of how was it scored, which is how those grants are done.
Right.
How was the scoring done? Now, we have requested those documents to look at them ourselves to say, all right, how was everyone scored? Not just Lowry's. What was looked at there? As I said, it is clearly evident that the two of the criteria were not followed to the T. That doesn't mean it's a crime. Because then again, too, Lowry would have had to fill out the form with the intent of defrauding. Intent's a very important one here. They lied on that form with the intent. If at that time, it's the current makeup of the EDC at the time that matters. At that point, which included an ally of his as the former mayor on the EDC may have been willing to look the other way. And it would have been not an intent to, unless you go into the conspiracy side of things. But we don't know. That's the thing. That's the question. But it's not as cut and dry as someone would say, oh, he lied on the form. Okay, let's go get him. It's not that cut and dry.
So TJ, I guess, it's interesting for me being an outside observer. I really have no dog in the fight per se, other than I have a natural general bias in favor of the city manager in these type of situations. But, when I've been reading for weeks about how supposedly the councilman's done X, Y, and Z, and he's a criminal, but yet you're telling me that nobody wants to take the appropriate steps to prosecute, then I think some of the people who are making these accusations against Lowry need to start actually directing their frustration towards the members of the EDC and the governing body and say, hey, why aren't you guys taking action, right? I mean... Well,
and we should point out, it's not that no one's willing to take on the challenge of doing that. It's just that they, you have to take it for what they're worth. Law enforcement has said that what's been brought to them doesn't meet the standard of a crime.
Of what's been brought to them so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm talking about specifically the election allegations as well as the EDC allegations.
Yeah. All those. I mean, you've got to bring it to the right. I've talked to several people here recently who said, well, this, and this. I said, well, let me take a look at it. And then when I look at it, I go, well, here's where this is wrong. But if you did it over here, you'd probably have a better chance.
Well, thank you, TJ. Our guest today has been TJ Aulds. He is the owner and journalist behind I-45 Now. He covers the Galveston County news beat, and we are going to tackle in the next episode the JB Pritchett situation. He is the city manager, or the former city manager in Marque, Texas, who is facing imminent arrest on 5 various charges, 2 felonies, 3 misdemeanors, and we are going to unpack that in the next episode, TJ. So thank you very much for being on. I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. If you enjoy the content, please hit that follow, subscribe button. If you like the content, please leave a rating and review on your platform of choice, especially those Spotify and Apple users. Thank you very much. Catch you next week.